Alright, good morning everybody. We're going to be talking about slope today. Okay, so I've already mentioned slope before, and to some of you I've already drew on some of the stuff that we've learned earlier and told you that we're going to see slope, which is basically the same thing that what we've been doing. Okay, and now is where I'm going to show you why that's the case. Now, alright, we're going to start at the top. Slope is the rate of change between any 2 points on a line. Okay, so slope, and it might be hard to read now, but on the packet you should be able to see it a little bit better. Okay, so the slope is equal to the change in y, okay, the vertical change up and down, okay, over the change in x, the horizontal change. So that's left to right. Alright, so in this case we have 2 over 1, so the change in y. So if we look, right there is the first point, here's the second point. Okay, so the change in y is we go what? Up 1, up 2. So that's 2. Okay, and once we're there, we go over 1. Okay, the horizontal change. So we go to the left or to the right 1. So 2 to 1 is your slope, which that also equals just 2. You have a slope of 2. Okay, now in a linear relationship, now our linear relationship is what? A line, right? A straight line. The vertical change in y value, so what you change on your y-axis, we went from 1 to 3 per unit of horizontal change, the change in the x value. We were at 1, we went to 2, so subtract those two, is always the same. Alright, so what that is telling us is that if we go up 2 and over 1, well, anytime we go up 2 and over 1, that next point will be on our line. Okay, so if we went up 2, if this line kept going, and over 1, our point would be right there. Okay, this ratio is called the slope. Alright, so called the slope of the function. The constant rate of change, I'm going to underline these because we talked about the constant rate of change earlier, or the unit rate is the same as the slope. If you got a paper copy of this packet, you need to make sure that you highlight that, underline it, circle it, whatever. Now, with that, we've talked about the unit rate. Okay? We also talked about what else? The concept of proportionality. Now, I'm kind of running off the page here and everything else, but alright. So, the constant rate of change, unit rate, constant of proportionality, and now what? The slope, they're the same thing. Okay? So, we're just finding the same thing we've been finding. Alright? Now, the slope tells us how steep the line is. Alright? So, basically, when we're asking for the slope, we want to know, in this case, how steep this line is. Okay? Alright, so if the line was down here, the slope would be less great or not as great. Okay, if the slope is up here, you have a greater slope. Okay, so the vertical change is sometimes called the rise, while the horizontal change is called the run, right? Because you run horizontally, you rise when you go vertically. Alright, so you can say that the slope is equal to the rise, which is your y, over your run, which is x. Alright, and this is your change in y over change in x. Okay, now it says count the number of units that make up the rise on the line in the graph shown above. Write this number for the numerator of the fraction below. Alright, so let's just go with, we're right here on the point, and right here's the next point. So we want to go even with this point. So we're going to go up 1, 2, 3. All right? So we write 3. Okay? Now, count the number of units that make up the run of the line. Write this number. All right? So we're right here right now. We went up 3, and now we want to go over, because we're doing horizontal now. Okay? We're going to go over 1, 2. 2. So the slope of the line is 3 to 2. Okay? Now, so that's how you do your slope. Rise over run. Okay? Now let's get into these examples. Let's see. Okay, the table below shows a relationship between the number of seconds, y, it takes to hear thunder after a lightning strike, and the miles, x, you are from the lightning. Graph the data and find the slope. All right? So we're basically still doing the same thing as we did earlier with graphing proportional relationships. All right? So, and remember, these are basically our ordered pair, x, y, right? So 0, 0, 1, 5, okay? 1, 5, 2 to 10, 2, 10, 3 and 5, 3 and 15, sorry. 3 and 15, 4 and 20, and 5, 25. Okay? Now, it says find the slope. Okay, well, I can find the slope. All right? And now, if I do this rise over run, I'm going to do rise over run first. Okay? So I'm going to go up how many? Well, it's not just 1, it's how many? I go up 5, right? And I go over 1. So 5 to 1, that's your rise over your run. Okay? Now, if we do it the other way, this says change in y, and this is change in x. Okay? I can give you any 2 points in this, and it's going to ask you, if I didn't give a table, and I gave you 2 points and asked for the slope, you could tell me the slope, and I'm going to show you how. All right? So in this case, we're going to take an ordered pair, and this is 525, okay, and 315. Now, I'm going to ask you to find me the slope, okay? So when you find the slope, this is your first point, all right? And we're going to name this y1, x1. You see how I wrote those little ones under there? And this is going to be y2, x2. Okay? And why I'm doing that is because if I'm looking at my points, what point comes first? Well, in my table, it's easy to see that 315 comes first. Okay? So that's y1, x1. Okay? And 525, it comes second. Okay? And look, I got these mixed up. X, Y. X, Y. I got ahead of myself, didn't I? Okay. So, when we do this, when we do the change in y over the change in x, this is y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. Okay? So, the second point subtract the first point is basically what we're doing. And you see that here. 25, 5 minus 15, 3, right? Okay, and all we do is we subtract. So 25 minus 15 gives us 10, and 5 minus 3 gives us 2. Well, we want to simplify. All right, when we simplify, what do? Just find a common denominator, right? Or find a common factor. So 2 is a common factor. So divide each of these by 2, and it's going to give you what? 5 to 1, which is exactly what we did with the rise over run. Okay? Now, If you have a graph, this is the easiest and fastest. If you do not, and it gives you just 2 points, that's what we're going to have to do. Okay? Okay. So, what your slope is telling us is, okay, because we're talking about changing y, our y is seconds and our x is miles, okay? So we got seconds over miles. So, for every 5 seconds, okay, between lightning flash and the sound of thunder, there is 1 mile between you and the lightning, okay? So I hear it, all right? 5 seconds means that there is a mile between us, okay? So I see the lightning flash. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that that lightning strike was a mile away, okay? All right. Now, let's see if we can do this. All right, my graph lines are gone. All right, so my graph's not going to be, it's not going to look very pretty. Okay, so graph the data about plant height for a science fair project. Then find the slope of the line, explain what the slope represents in the work zone. So it says explain, so we need to write. Okay, we're going to have to write it out in words what it means. Okay, so the first one, okay, so we've already have our x and y labeled, okay, so this is my x, this is my y. So I'm going to go over 1 and up 1.5, so I'm guessing that's going to be, I'd say somewhere right in there, okay. Then I'm going over 2 and up 3, so I'm assuming right there. 3 weeks, 4.5 centimeters. So about halfway and 3, I don't know, pretty close to right there. All right, now 4 and 6. So that's right on 6 and right on 4, which I'm about right there. Okay. Now, is this perfect? Absolutely not. Pretty close, maybe. Okay. So we got to find the slope. All right, seeing that my grid is gone, rise over run, I don't know if it's going to be very accurate, okay? So I'm going to do it like I did this one up here, okay? All right, so I want to do the change in my y, which is my y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? So what we get here, I'm just going to fix. I'm going to choose the first 2 points, okay? So here is my second point, here's my first point, okay? So my y, 3 minus 1/2, okay? This is my y2, y1, x1, x2, okay? So 2 minus 1, all right? So I just put them in there. And that's going to give me a slope of, well, 3 minus 1/2, or 1.5, is 1.5, and that's going to be 2 minus 1 over 1. So my slope should be 1.5 centimeters per week. Okay, that's what it's telling me. So my slope is basically 1.5, right? Because 1.5 over 1, well, that's 1.5. Okay, now what this means is that I'm just going to call it my plant grows 1.5 centimeters per week, right? Because y over x, right? My units, y over x. So 1.5 centimeters per week, okay? Or the plant grows 1.5 centimeters per week. All right? So your slope, when we're writing the sentences, okay, we're basically talking about our unit rate, right? So the plant grows at a unit rate of 1.5 centimeters per week. Okay, that's how we basically explain it, is telling everybody what the unit rate is. All right, so let's go to one more example. Okay, then I will have this posted and you can get started on it. Okay, all right, now Ronaldo. So example 2, Ronaldo opened a savings account each week. He deposits $300. Okay, draw a graph of the account balance versus the time. Find the numerical value of the slope. Okay, and interpret it in words. All right, so we've graphed it. So 1 week, 300, and it just goes up. All right, so the number of weeks, amount. So the slope of the line is the rate at which the account balance rises. Okay, so we know that. Or $300 per week. All right, so that's what we're going to say, $300 per week when it's asking for the numerical value. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the sample problem. Jessica has a balance of $35 on her cell phone account. She adds $10 a week, okay, for the next 4 weeks. In the work zone, graph the balance versus the time. Find the numerical value of the slope. All right, so where does she start? 0 weeks, she's already started at 35, right? So she's already right in here. All right, so the first week, you add $10 more. She's going to be on about the 45, somewhere right in here. The next week, she's going to be about on a 55 because you're adding $10 more. Okay, and you add $10 more. 3 weeks, 65. 4 weeks, 75. Okay, so something like that. All right. So we need to find the numerical value. Well, we already know the numerical value because what does it go up each week? That is your unit rate. She adds $10 a week. All right. So $10 for 1 week. All right. We already know the slope. It gives it to us. 10 to 1. Okay. Now, we started up here because why? Well, she already had $35 in her account. All right. Now, interpret it in words. Well, Jessica, if I can spell her name right, make it look halfway decent. She deposits. Jessica deposits, if I can spell, what? $10 each week. Okay? Now, you have guided practice. Okay? Now, if it tells you to graph the data, we're not going to graph it. We're just going to give the slope and explain it. Okay? So, no graphing. If you have a packet and it helps you to graph it, by all means, go ahead. But just tell me the slope and explain it. All right? So, you got 2 questions on your guided practice, okay, that you're going to do. Okay? And, again, you don't have to graph. Just tell me the slope and explain it. All right? So, 1 through 3. Now, 3 has A, B, C, D, and E in it. Okay? And it wants to know, what does a point represent? Well, what do these points represent? Well, the relationships. Okay, we talked about that. All right, now, for 3, be aware that you have 2 cars. So these points are going to represent different things for different cars. Okay? Now, you don't have to graph, just tell me the slope and interpret it in words. So tell me in words what it means. Now, slope is no different than what we've already talked about. All right? And we saw that. Let me flip to the front here. Right here. All right? Right here. So, complete this for today, and tomorrow we're going to review proportions. Okay, you're going to have an assignment on proportions tomorrow, all right, which will be Wednesday. Thursday, you have a little study guide that we'll go over, and then Friday will be your unit test. Okay.